Hi and welcome to this brief series where I'll be going through the IT management approaches, methodologies, activities and practices, and I'll be giving you the main headline points and the base foundation knowledge you should be aware of. I'll also discuss in this series some of my real world experience and applications of these practices and activities and methodologies in different organisations. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, click the bell, you'll get those updates. Okay, so let's get to it. Today I'm going to be covering off briefly SIAM. So that's Service Integration and Management. It's going to be a condensed version. I'm starting off with a quick refresher generally, and then we'll move on to structures and the ecosystem. So quick refresher around what is SIAM? Well, it's ITSM based, it's service orientated, it's a management methodology that is used where services come from a variety of different places, i.e. service providers. And you also then have an entity called a service integrator, which basically gets them all to collaborate and deliver value. It's very much end to end. The service integrator does an act of orchestration. The service integrator integrates and orchestrates all of these various service integrators. Typically, organisations that have lots of service providers and perhaps in inverted commas, it needs attention. So perhaps they're looking for better value, better governance, better quality, better contractual arrangements. Maybe it's too complex, or maybe they're looking for better assurance or better integration. Certainly in some organisations I've worked in, it's just not the right fit. They need a different type of model to operate in, and SIAM is able to provide that. Or maybe it's just not the right mix of partners, i.e. service providers. It's value focused, very collaborative based. It focuses on the end-to-end piece. I'll just make a slight aside. There is a difference between collaboration and cooperation. Collaboration in this context is much better. It allows users to convert something that's really complex as an operating model and simplify it. It has some pedigree. It goes back to the 2000s in terms of the UK government and the public sector. It's a global concept. There's certainly lots of different countries that use this and adopt it and recognize it, from India, Germany, Netherlands, Scandinavia, Australia and Japan. It's all about helping deliver end to end. I think the point there as well, just to emphasize, is it helps it. It doesn't completely solve it. It's something that helps it. So let's talk briefly around SIAM structures. So there's 4 models, if you will, around how to do SIAM as a way of terming it. You've got an internal approach, you've got an external approach, you've got a hybrid approach, and you've got a lead supplier. Internal approach, customer takes on the role of the service integrator, of the SI. This does need to be impartial, it does need to be independent. There are challenges with this model, and I speak from experience, having been a service integrator internally and working for the organisation. External, so perhaps the customer will appoint a external organisation, offshore maybe, and they perform the role of the service integrator. They are exclusively focused on service integration. Again, I talk from experience here. I have worked in the external model, and I have been from the service integrator, and I've also been from the service provider, and I've also been from a customer perspective. Hybrid, as you might imagine, as a structure, it's a combination of the internal and external, again, focused on service integration. And then lead supplier, service integrator, is actually one of those service providers. There are other challenges and other elements you need to take into account there. Certainly it's important to make sure that the service provider does indeed have service integration capabilities. Side point here, the service integrator doesn't necessarily have a contractual relationship with the service providers, or the multiple service providers. The service integrator, their role is about end-to-end integration. So let's move on to the ecosystem quickly. So there's 3 layers to this. You've got your customer, you've got your service integrator, and then a selection of service providers. The customer organization is usually in a diagram. You'll see at the top you'll have the customer, and then they will have something called retained capability. So that will be activities or functions that they will want to hang on to themselves. The service integrator then sits in the middle, and beneath those you have the service providers. It's worth pointing out those service providers can be internal teams and they can be external service providers as well. So let's just dig very quickly into each one of those layers. So customer layer, the customer organization, so think end client in this context. They're moving to an ecosystem based on some kind of driving or some kind of underlying strategy. The customer owns that contractual relationship. It's important to remember. I mentioned retained capabilities. So I've seen, excuse me, I've seen governance and oversight being retained, business engagement, contractual management, risk, enterprise risk especially. Procurement, I've seen on both sides. I've seen that passed over to the service integrator or also as a retained capability, but it's not unusual for procurement to be retained by the customer. And then anything strategic or architectural, for example. When it comes to a service integrator, the key point here is this is the end-to-end bit. This is the governance piece. So the key functions happen here. This is where it happens. It's the management, it's the coordination, it's the cooperation, it's the collaboration, the delivery, the execution element here. It's about getting those service providers to all play nicely together, to all work together, to all integrate the services together, and taking an end-to-end view of life rather than just their silo, if you like, from a service provider. There's a lot of coordination, there's a lot of cross-functional activity here in the ecosystem and the landscape overall. And then finally you've got your service provider layer, which would be underneath the service integrator. If you're drawing a diagram, you've got the customer at the top, you've got the service integrator in the middle, and then underneath you would have a selection of service providers. They can be end users, they can be internal, they can be external service providers. So maybe just think as an example, maybe you've got an internal application development team, or you've got an external support maintenance contract, or desk services, cloud services, end user compute environments. You're going to have a mixture of internal and external, more likely than not. The service provider, they're responsible for managing their products and their services. Note the preferred term here actually is provider, service provider, in an ecosystem. So it's not so much vendor or third party. The service provider is the term here. They clearly will have their own processes in terms of how they operate their service, and part of the challenge of the service integrator is to get everyone to hook up to start using consistent processes. There's going to be lots of different tools in there. The obvious one, for example, is the ITSM tool. You may well find they've all got different service providers, have all got different ITSM tools, so there's an integration piece in there. Then final parting thoughts, items to ponder on really. There's three layers to the ecosystem: the customer organization, the service integrator, and the service providers. I've already mentioned those service providers can be internal and external. Structures, so when you think of SIAM structures, think, okay, we've got four options here. We can externally source a service integrator to deal with that orchestration and that collaboration piece, or we can do it internally. We can have our own internal department doing that, or you can have a combination of the two, and that's termed as the hybrid element, a hybrid service integrator. And then you've got a lead supplier, so perhaps one of those service providers has service integration skills. That's it, just for a very quick soundbite. I will be doing another session on implementing SIAM, where we'll discuss some of those phases around discovery and strategy, planning and building, implementing, running and improving. Please subscribe, and I encourage you to watch some of the other videos. Thank you.